Welcome back to another episode of the Draw the Line podcast. I'm your host, Anton Lee. Time is 8:47 p.m. on Sunday, December 18th. And for those of you who are watching at home, you are currently looking at my brand new setup, which involves my camera, this microphone, and some other fancy gadgets you may see or not see. But I've been trying to change things up, trying to get some more professionalism, if you might call it, into the show. And I think that changing the recording setup may be a way to do that. So if I'm looking around or if my vision gets distracted, please know that I'm doing my best to work with this new setup. But I wanted to start today's podcast with a topic that comes from the heart. We'll put it that way. And for those of you who have been listening to this point, or for anyone who knows, I am a diehard Cleveland sports fan. Now you may be asking yourself, why would you purposefully put yourself through such torture and adversity? Why not just pick another team that just wins? Well, the answer is my father. He grew up in Lyndhurst, Ohio, and he rooted for the Browns and the Cavs and the Indians his whole life, just like his father, my grandfather, my Akong. When he first came to this country, he fell in love with the Cleveland sports fandom. So I must now carry that torch and live with this legacy of sadness and heartbreak. But that's okay, because in the last 10, 15 years, I would say, the needle or the trajectory of Cleveland sports is pointing up, which is perhaps an unusual point in history, but I'll take what I can get. Right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers are third in the East with a record of 20-11. And the reason why they're playing at a contender level, why when you watch them play their best, they look like a team that can play with anyone. Celtics, Bucks, Warriors, you name it. They are true contenders. And when we talk about the MVP, we really only consider players on teams in the first, let's call it 4 seeds in the conference. This is why Donovan Mitchell right now is currently building a legitimate MVP case. As I mentioned before, the Cavs are 20-11, but they've had their ups and downs. You know, they started the season off 8-1, and then they had a pretty tough road trip in the West Coast, losing to Sacramento and the Clippers. It was just some pretty ugly losses that, you know, a young team has to go through. Darius Garland has been up and down this season. His shooting percentage has taken a bit of a dip, going from 46 last year to 42% this year. He has a lot of these careless turnovers where he just jumps in the air and he doesn't have anywhere to go. So he just throws it up and floats it and hopefully someone gets it, but then he, turns it over. Or he just makes misguided passes, or he dribbles too much and he steps out of bounds. In all, Darius has looked a little bit less aggressive this year. He doesn't seem to have that confidence when he isn't the true focal point of the offense. And he's also had some problems with length and size. You know, when he played against Toronto, he doesn't do too well because all those guys are 6'8" and lengthy as fuck. But the reason why the Cavs are playing so well is because they've been getting that consistent superstar production out of Donovan Mitchell. Currently, he is top 10 in scoring, shooting 50% from the field. And if you take out last night's abysmal 1-for-9 performance against the depleted Dallas Mavericks, Donovan Mitchell is shooting 44% from 3 this year. And he's the number 1 ranked shooting guard in the league, ahead of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown, and Paul George. He has a 24.87 PER, which is 2 points higher than the second place Booker. And I think Donovan Mitchell, he's got the stats, he's got the play, but if you watch him in the game, if you truly sit down and watch him, you'll notice that the way he plays fits perfectly with what the Cavs needed. He's not taking ill-advised shots, or he's not forcing the action. He is playing within the offense. He's taking the shots that they need him to, and he also acts as a safety valve when Darius can't get anything going in the pick and roll with Jared Allen or Evan Mobley. He is truly the leader, the emotional leader the Cavs needed. He plays with that energy where you're not gonna beat us. Like, I'm not losing. He plays with that kind of energy. He plays with the I'm not going down without a fight kind of energy. A couple nights ago, they played the Pacers, and I think some point during the third or fourth quarter, the Cavs, were sliding, not playing their best, sloppy on defense, and there's a moment where Donovan Mitchell gets wrapped up with Benedict Mathurin, the rookie on the Pacers, who's been playing great this year. I mean, I feel like there's a whole topic you could cover with just how impressive Benedict Mathurin has been playing this year. But Donovan Mitchell and Benedict Mathurin get tied up, and surprisingly, Donovan just holds onto the ball. He's kind of playing chicken with him, kind of like, I'm not. You gotta let go first. I'm not letting go. And in that moment, the crowd, which had been pretty docile to that point, rises to their feet. They're kind of clapping and cheering on Donovan Mitchell because he's trying to get something going. He's trying to get his team involved, kind of like how a coach or a manager in the MLB will get himself purposefully ejected to light a fire under everyone else's butts. That's what Donovan Mitchell was doing in that game against the Pacers, and that was a turning point in the game. He helped fuel the Cavs overcome a 13-point fourth quarter deficit, putting in 18 of his 41 in the fourth quarter. Man, this guy, he is amazing. So far this year, he is shooting 29 points per game from the field, about 4 or 5 assists a game, and he's shooting 50% from the field, which is his career. It's the best he's ever played. It's the most efficient, and it must be because when you leave a situation where you're the only guy and everyone knows you're the only guy, you can only do so much. He is shooting 44% from three. 44% from three. And when you watch him play, he's taking step backs and in transition. He's not just spotting up and shooting or taking shots that he's just wide open. No, he's creating 3-point shots and people are trying to close out on him, but he just still continues to make it. The Cavs right now are a team that I don't think anyone really wants to play in the playoffs. They're young. They have size in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. They have 2 elite playmakers in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, who also serve as 3-level scorers. They can get to the hoop. They can shoot in the mid-range. They can pull up from deep. And they're great passers. The problem with the Cavs right now, obviously, is that 3 to 4. Sorry, not the 3 to 4. The 3 position, because Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro are just not quite who the Cavs need in order to win a championship. They need someone like a Jeremy Grant, a Kyle Kuzma even. That's crazy that I even mentioned that. But the Cavs have a legitimate MVP candidate in Donovan Mitchell on their team. And if you watch the games, he's playing like it. Now, we're only a quarter of the way into the season. Of course, there's a lot of things that can happen in between now and when the voting begins. But Donovan Mitchell is really making a case for himself to be an MVP. And that's just not a homer take. That's not just me being biased. I don't want to be the guy who just roots for his team endlessly, supportively. I do, of course. I support my teams, but I try to be real about what it is. Donovan Mitchell, he is making a legitimate case to be the most valuable player in the league, and I think people need to pay attention to that. Moving on, we're going to talk about a guy that I think people thought of him like we think of Donovan Mitchell, but we don't anymore, and that player is Trae Young. The Hawks currently sit at 15-15. They're 8th in the East, so they'd be in the play-in at this point. And in their last 10 games, they're 4-6. They lost to the Magic, the Thunder, and the Knicks. You see, when you give up what you gave up to get DeJounte Murray, you don't want to be 500 at this point in the season. being 500 and also losing DeJounte Murray for what they say maybe a couple weeks, maybe he'll be back next week. It's not a great position to be in, especially when you made what everyone considered a win now move. It's not only been a DeJounte Murray fit problem either. It's not like it's DeJounte just to figure out how to fit in the offense better. It's been a Trae Young has been disappointing reason. Scoring 27 points per game sounds awesome, but you have to factor in he's shooting 40% from the field. That's the worst in his career. He's shooting 28% from three. That's also the worst in his career. His effective field goal percentage has fallen off a cliff from, around the 50s, mid 50s to 45%. And even with DeJounte Murray on his team, who's another, we'll not call him a shooter, but another creator, his assist numbers have not changed much. And if you watch Trae Young, the things that people said about him going into the draft, post-draft, even after the Murray trade, those problems persist. He is lazy on defense, and the Hawks have to try their very best to hide him so he isn't exposed to mismatches and switches and high pick and roll. He is consistently unengaged on the defensive side, sort of just resting, if you will. And it's worse on the other side, on the offensive side, when he isn't the one with the ball in the action. He's just standing in the corner waiting for someone to pass him the ball. To be an elite point guard at his size with his skill set, it's hard. It's hard to win a championship with a player like that. And if you're being honest, the only player like Trae Young who has actually done it is Steph Curry. Now, you can look at Trae Young and think, well, he's just a young guy. He's a young superstar. Maybe he'll grow into a player like Steph Curry, but I don't see it. I don't think that in the next 3-4 years somehow he develops the skill set and the mindset of someone like Steph Curry, who has that grit and determination to at least remain engaged on the defensive end. I'm not asking Trae Young to become Gary Payton or to become Drew Holiday. I'm only asking that Trae Young try a little bit, because even though Steph Curry doesn't succeed every time in disrupting plays or clogging passing lanes or whatever, his activity on the defensive end is better than nothing. And we all know what Steph Curry does on the offensive side. And that's the same situation for Trae Young. We know what he brings to the table in terms of shooting and playmaking, but his question marks on defense and leadership are more prevalent, or they're emphasized now more than ever, because the Hawks have been making moves to commit to this guy, signing him to extension. They got Murray. What next? They signed Bogdanovich. My goodness. If I'm the Hawks, what do you do? Do you package Collins and a first or whoever to try to get someone else? Or do you do what I am proposing, which is you look at what you have, you look at the direction the league is heading, and you say, I'm cutting bait. I'm not cutting Trae Young, but I'm going to trade Trae Young. You heard that right. I think the Hawks should trade Trae Young. And here's why. You don't ever want to be a team that's stuck in the middle. In the major league, in baseball, basketball, or football, you never want to be a team that's in the middle. A team that's just hanging around. Think the Washington Wizards or the Cleveland Guardians, for that matter, right? You don't want to be a team that isn't in a position to make a legitimate case to be a contender, but they're also not bad enough to get the first pick or to get a top prospect in the draft that year. It's like, what are you doing? Are you trying to make money? Is that it? I mean, that's fine. I guess that is what the business is making money, but that's not what your organization it doesn't do you any good to be in a position like that. And so if I look at Trae Young and I look at his deficits and his strengths and his whatever, I don't see a path where the Hawks or Trae Young win an NBA championship and the two are still together somehow. That doesn't add up in my head. How could it be that Trae Young and the Hawks win a championship together? I don't know if Trae Young can be the best player on a championship team. I mean, maybe that's how I should have said it to begin with. Trae Young is a kind of guy where it's almost like Westbrook. It's like he can only play one style, but then that one style requires him to do everything. And if he's not doing everything, he's doing nothing. But you need everything in order to win. And he's small and he's undersized. And there's just so many reasons why Trae Young, you don't know if he can be the best player on a championship team. So if he's not, then you need to get rid of him or you need to trade him or find someone else that can be. Because if you don't have one of those guys on your team, then you're not winning the chip. I know it's luck, and I know there's a lot of contributing factors that go into landing a guy that is a true nuclear weapon on offense and defense and for your organization's health and everything. But Trae Young is someone that doesn't have those factors. He's a B plus in my head. He's a B plus. And to win the championship, you either need an A or an A plus. Donovan Mitchell is an A. He's not an A plus. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's an A, not A plus. Trae Young, B plus. He's too small. He's not the leader. He's not a leader or any kind of leader for that matter. And he has a bad attitude. He's been pampered his whole life. I don't think he's the kind of person who's going to change into who the Hawks need. He's not. So if you're the Hawks, maybe you consider trading him to try to get a win now kind of player. Not a win now, but get like a real cornerstone piece. I think Trae could be an excellent Robin, but can he play a way where he's not Batman? Maybe that's perfect. Maybe Trae Young is just Robin pretending to be Batman. And when you actually need Batman, Robin can't be Batman. So yeah, the Hawks need to trade because they can't win a chip with Robin. You need Batman. Great. Okay, cool. Moving on. Just going to talk really quickly about my Browns. Whew. The Cleveland Browns, they beat the Baltimore Ravens on Saturday. Deshaun Watson's first home game. First home win, too. I look at the Browns and I am intrigued. Because as a fan, there's sort of two ways this goes. One is what I consider the more likely scenario, which is the Browns trade their future and their souls to acquire Deshaun Watson. He comes to the team. He plays okay, but never quite as good as you need him to. And then you decide to make changes around him, like in an organization capacity, like getting a new coach or a new coordinator, blah, 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 blah. And sooner or later, you realize, those 5 years that we had him for, they didn't actually end up being as valuable or as successful as they should have been. So I think it's actually pretty likely that the Browns, they have Deshaun, but then they actually don't win the Super Bowl despite him being the missing piece that they've thought they've been missing for a long time. But in classic Cleveland Brown fan fashion, I hold on to the sliver of hope, the off chance, the what if. The what if that Deshaun actually is the answer and he is the dynamic quarterback, the elite quarterback that the Browns have been missing for decades and decades. I can't think of a single elite quarterback they've had ever. Maybe they have that guy in Deshaun. He looks fast. He's big. He's able to extend plays. He has a good arm. He's smart. And I've seen these flashes of who the Browns could be in the last few games he's played, and he hasn't played in 2 years. I am really interested to see what the Browns could be with a full offseason with Deshaun Watson, with a full season with Deshaun Watson. I don't think he's a great guy, let's be honest, but NFL's full of shitty guys. So whatever. I guess it's, they say the one rotten apple doesn't make the whole barrel rotten. Well, I don't know how that saying goes, but that doesn't seem right to me because honestly, NFL's full of crappy people. So if we're gonna start picking and choosing, well, so be it. Go ahead, pick and choose. But he's on my team. I'm not gonna start rooting for him. I feel like I got totally derailed by this, but I'm hopeful about the Browns. I think that they can be a good team. A good team this year. And I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think there's too many things that have to happen for them to make the playoffs, but I think that the Browns could be a very good team next year, depending on how they do in the draft. And lastly, I wanted to cover my movie review account called Cinema Cake, which I run with my brother Devin. Currently, we are doing the 12 Cakes of Christmas, where we're reviewing one movie every day in the holiday spirit, I suppose, and in reference to the 12 days of Christmas. Something goes on the first day of Christmas, blah 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 blah. We are doing this. I want you guys to check it out if you are watching this at Cinema Cake with an underscore at the end. That's CINEMACAKE underscore on Instagram. The way we think of it is every movie is like a cake, and a cake has two parts: cake, like the cake part, and icing. As a young kid, you want to eat the icing first because it's delicious, it's tasty. Who doesn't like icing? But as you get older, you realize that the icing is only good because the cake is there, that you actually need more cake than icing. So when we look at movies, we think of the icing like the cinematography, the lighting, the music, and the production design, and the editing, or things like that. And the meat, the cake part of the movie is the conflict, the DNA of what's at stake, what's at play. What is this story if you strip everything back? That's what the cake is. So a movie is a combination of those two aspects, cake and icing. And sometimes there's a perfect balance between each one. There's so many different combinations of cake and different kinds of cake. And that's why we like reviewing movies this way, because it's less about a number or a rating. It's just about an experience, and we just try to recreate and reform watching a movie into an experience of eating a cake. Because I think everyone can kind of imagine what that cake would taste like. Like if I told you there was a cake that you would eat after a long meal, and it's elegant, it's fancy, and so you eat it really slowly and you savor each bite. It's not that complex, but it tastes wonderful, and it's a mastery of simplicity. You might be more interested in watching a movie that felt like experiencing eating that cake rather than hearing that a movie is 6 potatoes out of 8, and then that's why you watched it. So I would encourage everyone to take some time and to go check out Cinema Cake on Instagram. But that's going to do it for me on this episode of the Draw the Line podcast. Wanted to keep it nice and quick, just to get some stuff out there, just to keep practicing speaking and to keep talking about sports. I think it's a really interesting topic, It's something that I think about a lot in life. It's a true TV show, movie, whatever you want to call it, unfolding in real life, and it happens every year. So that's why I love sports. That's why I like this podcast. That's why I love Cinnamon Cake. And that's going to do it for me here on the LI Podcast. Thank you so much. Take care.